Welcome to the Central Arizona College Small Business Development Center Business Edge podcast. My name is Kevin Connors. I'm the center director.
And I'm Cal. I'm one of the business counselors.
We're going to talk today about getting things right, setting up your business correctly so that you're in compliance at the local, state, and federal level, and you can rest assured that you're starting the business correctly. So what's the first thing we should talk about here, Cal?
Let's talk about business entity and structure. And we know
Very
we've
good.
got the sole proprietor, you've got partnerships, you've got LLCs, and you've got corporations.
LLC is kind of the big one, right? Everybody thinks LLC. That's not necessarily correct to think that way, but LLC in Arizona is an inexpensive and easy thing to set up. Let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each of these structures, from sole prop, LLC, partnerships, and corporations. What's the deal?
Well, sole proprietor is a very simple way to go. Get you some business cards, a bank account, and you're in business. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and for a lot of businesses, that's the way to start.
Absolutely.
Start as a sole proprietor, unless, of course, you're worried about liability issues, then an LLC is the way to go.
Well, we do live in a litigious society. People will sue at the drop of a hat, right? So are you saying that if you have a business that does have the potential for being sued, is that what you're thinking?
That's what I'm thinking, yes.
Okay.
Now, you can get insurance to cover those kinds of things. So you really need to think about, what am I trying to accomplish here with the different sole proprietor or partnership or an LLC. If it's just for liability purposes, then we need to think through that, because insurance can cover some of that.
And actually, that's the way I started my business as a photographer. The probabilities of me being sued were fairly low. I mean, what's going to happen? A light stand falls on someone, that kind of thing. But I was primarily a beach photographer, and there are certain things that happened on the beach. Every year, it seemed, in San Diego, some moron photographer would take their clients out onto a rock, and a rogue wave would sweep them away. Serious stuff. But for the most part, I didn't, as long as I did things intelligently, I didn't have to worry about it. So when I first started the business, the advice from both my legal counsel and my CPA was, let's hold off on forming a corporation or LLC until you reach a certain level of sales where then it makes sense. So what I ended up doing was, I doubled up on my insurance. The first $1 million of liability cost me, this is back in the day, that first $1 million of liability cost me about $817, but the second $1 million cost me $16.
Right.
So it made sense for me to double up on the insurance, and until I reached a certain level. But I guess the point is, this is different for everybody. That was also taking into account my financial situation. My CPA knew where I was. So it's going to be different for everybody. All the more important to get professional advice on this too.
Absolutely. And we've seen people come in, they're an individual, but they want to form an LLC. And so the question is why. They say, well, for the liability purposes. We always talk to them about piercing that corporate veil. If you're a single person LLC, in reality, you're just a sole proprietor. Okay? When we look at the court systems and how the court rules, in order to keep that liability, they're looking for really a 2 or more person LLC.
Well, let's back up for a minute and talk about that LLC thing. You mentioned this term, corporate veil. Can you expand on what the corporate veil is a little bit?
Yeah, and it's a term we talk about.
It's legalese.
It's legalese that says, hey, we've got this veil here, and you can't pierce it to get to the person's assets over here. All you can do is get what is in the business, okay?
So that corporate veil, and by the way, veil spelled just like a bridal veil, V-E-I-L, that corporate veil creates the separation between your personal assets and the business. So it actually literally is the protection for your personal assets. That's why you create the LLC or a corporation in the first place, right?
Right. Because if I'm a sole proprietor, they can sue my business, which is essentially myself.
Right, there's no separation
There's
between
no
you and
separation,
the
so they can
business.
come after me, all my belongings. If I've got a cabin up in the mountains, they can come after that. If
Yeah.
I've got a boat I take up to Lake Powell, they can come after that.
Okay.
So we want that veil in there that protects all your assets over here.
So if you've got a business like a food truck business where the potential of getting sued because somebody gets sick is, hopefully it's minimal, but it's still there, you probably want to think about forming an LLC as a food truck proprietor, right? As opposed to staying a sole prop there and just doubling up on insurance. It'll help, but
It depends on your assets. If you've got a lot of assets you're trying to protect, absolutely.
Yeah.
If I'm living out of the back of the food truck, then I don't have too much to worry about, Kevin.
that's not much to lose, in other words. But yeah. So let's take the LLC now in specific. When you create the LLC, you are establishing the corporate veil
Right.
that separates your personal assets from the business. And if someone does sue you, to use more legalese, that opposing lawyer is going to attempt to pierce the corporate veil, right?
Absolutely. They're gonna try and pierce that corporate veil and go after your personal assets. So if you're an LLC, there's a few things you have to do to try and keep that corporate veil in place. They can't come after your personal assets.
And those things are, why don't you go through those? The four big things that you have to do to maintain the corporate veil.
We would tell everybody, don't commingle funds. But even if they're a sole proprietorship, we would tell them, don't commingle funds. Have a bank account for your LLC. Well, I need a credit card for my LLC. Well, get a credit card for your LLC. Don't use your personal credit card.
Building business credit, too. That's an
Yes.
important thing to do.
So don't commingle funds, number one. Number two, you need to have an annual meeting, okay? Now, attorneys are going to say, well, who are you having that meeting with? If it's just you, it's a single person LLC, guess what? They start to pierce that corporate veil. If they look in your finances and you're paying for some things out of your personal account, some things out of the business account, you're not, at that point, you're commingling funds.
That's classic
They
commingling.
pierce that
Yep.
corporate veil.
Yep.
Okay? The other thing that a lot of people don't understand is you do need an operating agreement.
Yeah.
If you don't have an operating agreement, then you're just acting as a sole person. They pierce that corporate veil. So an operating agreement is also very critical. Now, one of the things that we tell our clients is when you form that operating agreement, you've got really two options. One, you can have a notary sign it, puts a date on there. That establishes the date. What I like to do, it's much cheaper, I should say more convenient. I put it in an envelope, I mail it to myself. I do not open up that envelope. Now I've got a postmark on there and a sealed envelope.
Gotcha.
That also works.
So the last of the four bits is,
This is what catches everybody. They can do everything right, but when you sign a legal document, just don't sign it John Doe. You don't want to sign it John Doe, comma, managing member. That lets everybody know that you're not signing that document, but you're signing that document on behalf of your LLC.
so again, the big four things that you have to do when you're an LLC to maintain that corporate veil is, one, you can't commingle funds.
Correct.
Have a separate checking account for the business.
Yes.
No brainer. You need to have some kind of annual meeting.
Yes.
Those are simple, they're not difficult. Just make sure that recording meetings and you do them at least once a year. Third thing, and a lot of people miss this. I missed this until you joined the SBDC. Thank heaven you're here. Is this whole idea of you have to create an operating agreement. And as you said, if you want to do it easily, put it in an envelope, send it to yourself, don't open up the envelope, or go to a notary to get the date signed on that document as to when that operating agreement was established.
Before I go to the fourth one, the reason a lot of people forget about the operating agreement is because when you register with the state, all they want are your articles of organization. They never ask for your operating agreement. And in fact, nobody asks for it until you go to court. Now, if you have several members of an LLC, then you'll pull that into use and how do we have our meetings, how do we vote, and all that type of thing.
Gotcha. And then the last bit of the four is making sure to sign, whenever you sign any legal document, you sign your name, comma, managing member.
Yes.
And that will maintain, those are the big four things to make sure that you're maintaining the corporate veil, so that if you do get sued, in all likelihood, you're going to be protecting your personal assets if indeed someone decides to file suit against you.
Right. Now,
right.
when a client comes in and talks to us, we can show them some sample operating agreements, and we'll walk them through, here's what you should be looking for. So when you talk to your legal person, whether it's an attorney or whoever, you know what questions to ask and what things to be looking for.
Very good. And we're putting a website up on the screen right now. This is a place to go for more information. It's at the SBA's website for information on business entities and structures and such.
Absolutely.
So, but as always, we're always going to say to you, make sure to consult a legal professional for making an informed decision, because everybody's circumstances are different, and it's important to get professional help. We at the SBDC can provide you with information, help you to understand the questions you should be asking, but we cannot provide legal advice. It's just that simple. And this is not legal advice, by the way. There's our disclaimer.
Here's an interesting thing, Kevin. What if I want to form an S corporation?
What about it?
Where
are you going with this?
Can I go and form an S corporation with the state of Arizona?
No, because
Exactly.
the S corporation is not an entity in and of itself. It's pretty much just how you file your taxes, really, when it comes down to it.
Yes. So that's something we need to talk about, because a lot of people think I'm going to form an S corporation. They don't fully understand it. So just understand that's a way to file your taxes as an S corporation.
Yeah.
And you can form an S corporation once you're an LLC. You elect to be taxed as an S corporation at
Right.
that point.
Again, good reason to talk to a legal professional here, too.
Absolutely.
So, when it comes to entity registration of trade name with Arizona, you got to do this, of course. So, what you'll likely do is you're going to consider a unique business name. Obviously, you want something that is descriptive, perhaps, of your business, something that does deliver a bit of messaging on what you actually do. So. We do have some suggestions here that when you do select a business name, there's a few things that you should make sure of. First of all is make sure that web address, that URL, is available for that particular name. That's easy enough to do. You go to whois.com, or you can go to the GoDaddies of the world and type in the name that you're thinking of, making sure that URL or web address is available, right?
Absolutely. So years ago, we started a business, I can't remember, Strategic Coaching, I think it was. The name was available in Arizona, so we locked up that name. But then we went to get the website, and strategiccoaching.com was taken. And
Bummer.
so they did a strategic coaching dot something else. Well, when you promote that, people forget that it's .net or something. So they always type in something else, and they're sent to somebody else's business. So
Right.
Getting those names and the URL to match is super critical.
And, if you're a for-profit business, .com is the coveted
Right.
way to go. The other thing we recommend is that you test the acronym. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if you, this is silly, but let's
But it's
say,
a good example, and they'll never forget it, Kevin.
It is. Let's say you create a company called the People's Organization of Operational Perfection. Again, People's Organization of Operational Perfection. The acronym for that is?
Poop.
Yeah, that's no good. So you must check or test the acronym of the name that you're creating.
Yes.
All right, so you think you got a good name. What's the next thing you want to do?
You've got a good name. You check the URL, make sure it's available. I would suggest you register that trade name with the state of Arizona. And you do that through the Secretary of State. We'll put the web address up there for you. You just go in, it's a $10 fee, and I think it's every 10 years you need to renew.
Every 5 years.
Every
I think.
5 years, you
Yep.
need to renew that trade name.
You also want to make sure that the name is available, and you can do that at the Secretary of State's website as well, right?
Right.
Start that way, make sure it's available, and then, as you say, let's register that trade name. Let's capture that name so no one else can use it, right?
Right.
That's
And
the
remember,
idea.
you're registering a trade name on a state level, not a federal level.
Right, if you want to do a trademark at the federal level, that's a whole nother animal, you
Right.
got to do that through the Fed. All right, so you've verified the availability of the name, you've registered the trade name at Arizona State, Secretary of State.gov. What about LLCs and corporations?
All right. I'm going to go back to the Secretary of State. Register your trade name there. Okay. Also, if you're forming a partnership, that partnership needs to be registered with the Secretary of State. If you're a sole proprietor, you don't register with anything.
You just
But-
hang the shingle and go.
That's right. But a partnership, Secretary of State, your LLC and your corporations, they move over to the Arizona Corporation Commission.
Right.
And that's where you go ahead and register that.
And we'll put that website up there right now, and there's the website for the Arizona Corporation Commission. All right, so that's taken care of your name, registering the trade name with the state of Arizona and the Arizona Corporation Commission.
Yeah. One thing I need to add here, if you're doing your LLC online or your corporation online, and you've already registered your trade name, when you go in to register your LLC, and if it's Pink Pineapple Cafe LLC, if I've registered Pink Pineapple Cafe, it's going to ask me, do you own that? Because if I don't have that trademark, if somebody else has a trademark, it's going to stop me from forming an LLC with that same name.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. All right, let's move on to the next topic, and that's the EIN and TIN. These are federal tax IDs, the employer identification number and the tax
Identification.
number, thank you. So EIN and TIN, I know that folks listening and watching, you know, they hear these things knocked around, yet another acronym. So what are we talking here, Cal?
And people want to know, are they the same thing? They kind of are the same thing, but they're a little bit different, okay? So
Okay.
a TIN, taxpayer identification number, is kind of a grouping, and an EIN kind of falls underneath that. However, here's how I explain it. If you're a sole proprietor and you don't want to be handing out your social security number to everybody you're doing business with, your bank and everybody else, go get a TIN, taxpayer identification number. If you're going to have employees, you will absolutely need to have a TIN.
Certainly. So that's, if you're a sole prop and you don't want to be handing out your social security number every time you do something, go out and obtain a TIN.
Right. Now, if you're an entity, like an
LLC.
LLC, a corporation, then you really want to have an EIN.
Well, you don't really want to have it, you must have it.
Yeah, in fact, in order to register with the state, in order to register and get an EIN, you must have your LLC already formed.
Sure.
Now, how do I remember that EINs are for entities? I take that E instead of employer, I just change that to entity identification number.
Okay,
That's
so
how I remember.
An EIN means employer identification number, but what you're using is kind of a name recognition thing, that E there represents
An entity.
entities.
Yes.
So LLCs, corporations, you got to have an EIN.
Right.
Simple as put. Let's see, so, as you mentioned, you've got to have an EIN to open a bank account. If you want to hire employees,
Yes.
again, if you're an entity, right? If
Right.
you're an LLC or a corporation, filing business taxes, you absolutely have to have your EIN. The EIN, in essence, is the business's social security number, right? That's a
Correct.
simple way to put it. All right, very good. Moving on to yet another acronym, the TPT, which is, call it proprietary to Arizona, the state of Arizona. The TPT, otherwise known as the transaction privilege tax, otherwise known as the
Sales tax.
Arizona, Arizona sales tax. Yes, that's it. So this is the tax that you collect as a business owner and then pass that on to the Arizona State Department of Revenue.
Yes.
Typically, once you get the business rolling, you're going to do that on a quarterly basis.
Now, what most people don't understand, they're like, well, my city also has a sales tax. How do I collect that and how do I pay them? Doesn't matter. When you apply for your TPT license, one of the things they're going to ask you is, where's your operations of business? Give us the zip code. Based on the zip code you provide, it will then say, here's how much you need to collect. You just collect the taxes, you send that into the state, and they send it out for you to each city, county, or whatever the need is.
Exactly. It's important to note that you are simply collecting sales tax. You are not, as a business, paying sales tax.
Correct.
Right? You're collecting it. Something to understand that difference. And also, again, when you first get started, you won't have to pay it as frequently as every quarter, but soon enough, once you reach a certain level, I can't remember what that is. Do you know what that
I don't
level of sales
recall.
is? I can't even, I don't remember it either.
Don't worry, they will tell you.
Yes, you'll know from them, trust us. But you will be at a, as long as you're doing well at a certain point in time, probably sooner than later, you'll be asked to pay that on a quarterly basis.
The hard part is trying to decide who really needs to collect that tax and send it on to the state.
Yeah, you got to determine if your business needs a TPT or transaction privilege tax license. And really, there's a rule of thumb, right? If you're selling a tangible product, you likely, almost 100% of the time, you will have to pay your TPT, a transaction privilege tax. You don't do this for services. Services are an intangible item.
Most services.
Most services, thank you. But if you're selling cell phones, if you're selling water bottles, anything that's tangible, then you have to collect sales tax on it, which is your TPT.
Correct. There are some examples that we probably ought to just bring up that do need to collect TPT. One of those is short-term rentals. Airbnb, Vrbo type things, they must collect that and then pass it on to the state, as well as hotels and motels. You're not buying a room or even the pillow there, you're just getting the service, but that is something that we do collect a tax on. Commercial and residential landlords must also do that. And this is kind of the interesting one. Crafts and trade shows must also do that. And then, of course, contractors. If I come in and do some work in your house, I've got to collect a tax from you and pass that on to the state as a contractor.
Well, it kind of makes sense. That's a tangible item too, right? And maybe you're doing some work and building a wall, or that's a tangible item.
Okay, all
so,
right, I'll give you that.
Hey, listen, I don't want to, help the TPT folks out, but that's the way it is. So what you want to do is you want to register with the Arizona Department of Revenue to obtain your TPT license. $10, and you get your TPT. It takes 2 or 3 weeks or so, something to that effect. So bear that in mind, that if you're going to go out and start selling at a farmer's market or something, make sure that you do that ahead of time to make sure that you obtain your TPT license.
And we've got a handout we share with our clients that walks them through step by step. It's got pictures. You do this is what they're looking for, and we explain everything. So it shouldn't be any problem signing up for your TPT license.
So you go to the Arizona Department of Revenue and you apply for your TPT, and you see on the screen there's the web address URL for that location at Arizona Department of Revenue.
So Kevin, we're getting a TPT license. What about other business licenses?
Everybody says, I got to get a business license, right? Well, these are locally required licenses through cities. So you need to check with your city or county, right? County may also have business license requirements. So you need to check with your city or county to see if indeed you need to have that. Certain industries, of course, they require additional permits and licenses. For instance, food services, food trucks. If you're a salon, you need a separate license, those kinds of things. So
What if I'm just a barber, I'm just cutting hair?
I think you still need a barber's license, don't you?
Yeah, I think you do.
Yeah, I'm
Now,
pretty
that's
sure.
an interesting point there, because if you are a barber and you cut hair and sell shampoo,
A tangible item.
a tangible item, guess what? You've got to collect that TPT tax for the tangible item, the shampoo.
Sure enough.
Not on the service you do.
Sure enough. Very good. So we've just gone through all of this stuff, but there's a way to kind of wrap this up easy for all of you there. Yeah, this is going to make things simpler for you. There's the Arizona Commerce Authority, which is Arizona's economic development organization. They have a wonderful service called the Arizona Commerce Authority's Small Business Checklist. You get there through the Arizona Commerce Authority's website. We'll put that up on the screen here in a moment. But basically what this is you go to this checklist and you start clicking check boxes. I'm going to be operating as an LLC. I'm going to be operating out of Casa Grande. I'm going to be selling candles. I don't know. In any case, you're going to click all. You'll see it. This is a long list of check boxes that you have to be meticulous about. You want to make sure you click all the boxes. But once you do this, and there's only going to be 5 or 6 boxes you're going to click total, anyways. But once you're done with that, you get down to the bottom of the page, and there's a red button that says "See Results." You click on that, and then it's going to return on your screen. It's going to return all of the things that you need to do to start your business in compliance at the local, state, and federal level. In other words, it's going to tell you need if you're operating as an LLC, you have to form your LLC. Here's the link to the Arizona Arizona Corporation Commission. It will not only give you the links as to where you got to go, but it will give you some explanation of how you got to do it. You need your EIN. It has the links all there for you as well. If you need business license operating in that town, it'll give you information on that. So the Arizona Small Business Checklist, by going through that it doesn't take more than a minute or two. You'll get all of the information that you need to be able to open your business correctly at the local, state, and federal level.
And the reason they have you go through that checklist is because that checklist is unique to your business. If I were to fill one out, it'd be unique to my business. If Kevin does a food truck and I do a barber shop, that checklist is going to be very different. So fill it out. It will just take you and say, this is what you need, lead you through it.
Absolutely. And there's also another site that you can go to called the Arizona Business One Stop. The Arizona Commerce Authority Small Business Checklist is actually embedded in that, but the One Stop has even more information around all of the things that you need to do to start your business. So you're seeing that website now on your site, on the page, sorry. Cal, I wanted to bring up one last thing that I think I forgot to mention. So what if I'm doing business in Casa Grande, City of Maricopa, Florence? Do I, one, need separate TPT licenses for that? Do I need separate business licenses? What's the deal on that?
You will need separate business licenses.
If they require it.
If
Sometimes they don't. Like City of Maricopa, that's changing though too, but they used to only require business licenses for certain businesses, but as I understand it, that's changing too.
Yeah. And your TPT, if you're selling a service, you don't need to worry about it. If you're selling a product, yeah, your taxes will be different for each of the cities. And so you'll need to look into that. Typically, they'll ask you, are you going to be selling more than one place? And then you need to collect the appropriate amount of money.
Exactly. That's the point is, if you are going to be doing business in different places within Arizona, then there are some other requirements that you'll have to make sure that you're complying with. So just wanted to cover that one.
Yes.
So that brings us to the end of this business entity and getting it right stuff. I want to thank you for joining us for this podcast. You can visit our both our social site at Facebook. You can visit our YouTube page, YouTube channel for all of our podcasts. We thank you very much for being here for this. We hope to see you again for our next podcast as well. So my name's Kevin,
And I'm Cal.
and this has been the Central Arizona College Small Business Development Center Business Edge podcast.
And here's to your ultimate success.
All right, thank you.